I think the most nervous I've ever been was putting that on in front of the entire congregation. So, is this good, Taylor? All good to go? All right, cool. What do we have behind me? Advance. All right, so thank you so much for hanging around. I really appreciate it. Ben, thank you so much for, I don't know if you had a choice to give us this time, but I thank you for doing that and doing the Cliff Notes version, but still answering the question. And on topic, what's another way of maintaining zeal? Being reminded of the faith of others. Paul always talked about the faith of others, and they heard of your faith, and vice versa. And God willing, this is something that we can do tonight. So Tim and I, for those that don't know, had the opportunity to go this last March and April for 3 weeks to southern part of Africa. And this is one of the open congregations that we visited. So purpose of the trips like this, a couple of different things. So one, learn about the men that we support, their work. So we support 3 men in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Warren Skoltz in South Africa, Tando Nakube in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, and Clayton Sande in Mutare, Zimbabwe. And another thing is we want to know, as far as stewardship for our own funds that we're sending over there, that they're being used for what we think they're being used for. Edification for local churches there. A lot of times they've only heard one preacher, and so when you have someone coming from a whole other country that's saying the exact same thing, people respond a lot of times. Same thing here with, why do we have gospel meetings? Why is it that some people get baptized during a gospel meeting? It's the bane of the existence of the local preacher, right? He's like, I've been saying the same thing for 6 months, and now you're baptized? Like, come on. But same type of thing. And then also opportunities, there's charity, there's charitable giving that needs to happen on an individual basis. And so while we're there, look for those opportunities in case people want to help in ways that the church isn't allowed to. This is let me see if my pointer works. All right, good. Yeah, so we started obviously here. We had a layover in London and then went down to Johannesburg. And then from Johannesburg, about 6 hours north of there is a town called Louis Trichardt. And that's not where we ended up, but that's kind of the closest major city. If you look on a map, you'll find that. This was our original plan. It was going to be 19 days, and it was kind of one of those instances, if you've ever read the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, that it just, one thing leads to another. We were going to go see Warren, and then it's like, well, if we're going to see Warren, we might as well go see Clayton. And if we're going to see Clayton, you might as well go see Tando. So it kind of, 19 days is a long time. And that's kind of how the trip planned, because who are you not going to see while you're there? And so we wanted to do the most with the money that we had available from the plane tickets. We wanted to get the most out of it. This was the itinerary there. Kind of the results, it was 19 days abroad, 16 congregations we were able to visit in the 3 different countries. There were 19 sermons between both Tim and I, and then 23 baptisms from several congregations in Botswana. And Warren did the baptizing there. And just kind of how we'll go about this presentation, we'll hit in kind of chronologically as we went. We'll do Botswana, Zimbabwe, and then Bala in South Africa. First off, there we go. I wanted to give a special thanks to our wives that allowed us to go. That's not an easy thing, especially if you have kids in the house or grandchildren in the house, whatever the case might be. Thank you very much for letting us go, and thank you all for keeping them in your prayers, us in your prayers, and helping with all aspects of that. The funny thing with traveling here was everything was 6 hours. It was, we were here in All Days, which is, so Louis Trichardt that I mentioned a minute ago is right here, and then All Days is right there. That's the closest town to where Warren's at. It's nothing but farms around him. And then it was 6 hours to Soroe in Botswana, and then 6 hours back, 6 hours to Triangle, 6 to Mutare. You get the idea. So I don't know if that's just happenstance or what, but everything was a long drive. And then so hazards that we would kind of potentially face. On the way to Botswana, there is nothing here. There's a huge national park, and that's the only way to get to this town where these villages are. And that's where we ran into this guy. So we wanted to make sure to include some animals that we saw. But there's no fence there. That was just on the road. And so we went through kind of a low area where there's a creek, and this guy was right there and we had to stop, obviously, being tourists, and back up. And I mean, he was probably from here to the door. I mean, he was a little close, so it was a bull elephant. So we drove when he started walking towards us. But in this area too, there are lions, and so Warren was like, "Hey, we don't need to go to the bathroom. Let's not get out. Let's just keep going." We didn't go to the bathroom, so we just kept going. But there's all kinds of stuff in this area, so it's not good to break down or anything along those lines. So in Botswana, there are 3 congregations that Warren has helped establish there, and he had a lead from a guy that he worked with that knew a lady in one of these towns that was potentially interested. And so, long story short, he met with her, converted her, and then it's kind of spread to one town to another, and it's down a long road, and there's several miles in between each village. So each village has its own chief, and so you have to coordinate with the chief, like, "Hey, do you mind if I come in, and this is who I am, this is what I'm doing," and you get the chief's blessings, and you start your work that way. So there's 3 congregations there. There's 2 men that we wouldn't call them preachers as of yet, but they're on their way. They're 2 Christian men that are local in those villages that are starting the process of becoming preachers, and it's just knowledge, right? So they served as our interpreters. One was named Pius, and the other one was named Sparks. And then one interesting thing here, we were preaching, and we came across the fact that there's no word in Tswana, that's the language, for sacrifice. And so if you're put on the spot right now, if you can't say sacrifice, what do you say? Because that's what I came up with gift on the spot. Offering would probably be a better one, but it kind of makes you think about those types of things. Let's see. So this is another aspect, or another picture of the same congregation. One interesting thing here, and I'll point out some of this, women sat on one side, and men sat really on the other. So they sit polar opposites of one another. If there are chairs, which is a rarity, men get the chairs in order of age. So the man all the way down to, a 14-year-old will be sitting in a chair while an 80-year-old woman will be on the ground. Mind-blowing to us here, right? So that's one of those things, but, we're guests there. We honor their culture and their normals, their norms. There's one baptismal that we did the baptizing in. If you look at it there, it's an end cap of a pipe, one of those industrial pipes, and someone just used that and said, "Perfect, we'll fill it up." And there were 23 baptisms that day from a couple of different of those villages, but it was super interesting because it had been about 2 months since Warren, about 2 months since Warren has been there. The border was shut previously about a month back. But you think, well, why were people waiting? The interpreter that we had, he was scared to baptize. He thought he was going to do something wrong or not say the right words. And so there's maturity that needs to come with that, right? And so Warren was like, okay, next time, this is important. You don't wait. There's not a script. You're not going to mess it up. Just do it. So there's maturity that comes with this. So, but it's really interesting, those things that you face there. The other thing was, every single one of the people who were baptized were terrified, absolutely mortified of going underwater. So this is a very arid area, and they have never been underwater in their entire life. And so the idea of, okay, I'm going underwater, what do you mean? It's crazy. And so if the only thing, when Warren's kind of a bigger guy, I mean, he's not small. When he would baptize them, if you've ever seen the cartoon where like a cat stuck its tail in a light socket and just went full, straight, and you see its skeleton, that's what it looked like when they were baptized. Okay, I mean, they just went straight as a pencil, and some of the times Warren had to make sure that they would stick their arms up or come up too fast, and we wouldn't get all of them under. It's like, hey, listen, this is a burial. Like, you need to go back under, and so don't fight me. He would have to say that. And again, those are things that you wouldn't even think about. Most people are petrified to come up in front of people to be baptized, not the actual act of it. So just thinking of baptism being an act of obedience, that was something very interesting with this. Let's see here. We do have some videos coming up, but this was another congregation in Botswana. And notice there's no shade. So Tim here, he's full on looking in the sun. He was red as a tomato by the end of the day. all the people were around a little bit, and they'd move as the sun went. Is really interesting. But that's something that is there a future for like a shade structure or something? Maybe that would be very helpful. But it makes us kind of consider what are our needs and our wants when we look at as a church. This is, as far as Warren teaching the acts of worship. How do you teach singing to a culture that they sing, but not in an organized fashion like this? You recognize the theme or the tune? It's fascinating. They would have printed out songbooks, and one side would be English, and the other side would be Swana, and then it'd be Shona when we go into Zimbabwe. But fascinating, and many of them also speak English to different degrees, so they can read English a lot of times. This congregation here was made up, they're the descendants of what we would call the bush people, or the sand people, and it's kind of a persecuted tribe in that. It's kind of a minority within that culture, and they were forcibly relocated to these areas. And all of the congregation here were women. None of their husbands have yet obeyed the gospel, and that's a cultural thing as well. That's a big barrier. Most of the congregations we were at, probably 80% women. And so how it kind of works is you get a strong woman. She spreads it to other women. A congregation's formed, and then you get a man. And then he spreads it. And now it's like, it's okay for this man to submit to this new religion, and so other men join. And that's kind of the process through years and years and years. It's just fascinating. But this brings, specifically in my mind, this brings verses like 1 Peter 3, 1 and 2. Wives likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. That's that verse in life. Some of their husbands were off to the side listening, and I'm sure that happens all the time. Again, just fascinating here. One thing I wanted to point out as well, so this is, Warren calls this a church in a box, and obviously that's not the assembly, so we're not, we don't need to go into the Greek and everything, but this is everything you need to do a church service. He puts in a tote like that, waterproof. You have Bibles, you have songbooks, you have the emblems for the Lord's Supper, and it's there. And then he gives that to that assembly there, and then they have someone that's in charge of that, and they bring it. And so they're responsible for that. This is putting together Lord's Supper. He has a little a grape juice, little grape box juice with the little straw on it, and he's individually putting in each one. Again, I think that makes it real to me. I enjoy the raw nature of that. In regards to benevolence, we've supported these congregations many times throughout the years, and I love seeing things like this. This wasn't planned. These are ledgers at two of the congregations where the local Christians there keep record of assembly to see who is faithful, and then they keep a record of assembly of which family got how much mealy meal, and that's basically a big bag of cornmeal that consists of their staple diet. And so Warren says, hey, our decision here is, if you're a new Christian, you need to be a Christian for several months before you can even think about any type of benevolence. And that way, someone's not becoming a Christian specifically for benevolence or whatever it might be. So, again, that's their decision. But also, the thing here that's interesting is Warren is not dictating who gets what. He's showing stewardship on our end, but it's that local congregations that they're the ones in charge of, hey, this family, they need this. This family, they don't have any kids, they don't need as much, or whatever it might be. So again, those are all things that I look at and say amen. Like that makes me very happy to support those types of works. This lady at one of the congregations said, thank you so much for all the help over the years. And I said, well, hey, you tell the congregation, I'll take your video.
The Church of Niabana said, the Church of America I'm telling you that God bless you because we give some million to the church of nearby. God bless you.
And so these are real human beings that we've helped, and that you've helped. Your contribution has gone to that. So it can sometimes, the American way can seem like you write a check and it just goes off into the nethers. There's real human beings on the other side of us that their lives have been impacted for the good. So from them to you, thank you very much. Another huge opportunity with Botswana is the amount of children that are there within these 3 villages. There's 300 to 400 children, if not more. And these are not just like Christian children, but children from all the tribes there, all the villages. So when they see Warren and Ivy pulling up, they're running and like yelling and all this stuff. It's like a mob. It's fantastic. That's Ivy right there, and she's kind of in charge of the children, doing kind of a Bible class. And I wanted to point out here too, that's a homemade soccer ball this kid has. So most kids don't have shoes that you can see. Most of the soccer balls are made out of like socks that are just put together. They put tape on it. Very interesting. See if y'all recognize this. That's pretty awesome, right? I'm in the Lord's army. Now, do all of them speak English? I doubt it, but many of them do, okay? And they at least know what those words mean. So they love doing this kind of stuff. This is one, I got to move a little faster, but this is kind of some of the lesson material they're doing. They're learning about Moses, and they're coloring. And if you know, they would come up to show us, and each picture would be mostly one color. And you're like, oh, you really like yellow? It's like, no, that's all they had. They only have one color, so unless you can find someone to trade you, you're just using one color, right? But this little girl right here is pretty funny. Where's she? She was right here, and I took this picture, and then I looked down, and she had scooted up underneath my shadow. Just, they're very resourceful, just trying to get a little reprieve from the sun. So she was precious. So next we came back to All Days. So we were there a couple of days, and that's where the trip kind of went awry. There were some national protests that we found out were being planned in Zimbabwe. Just some protests. And I was like, well, what was the goal? A coup. They were trying to overthrow the president there. And so visiting Americans, bebopping through the countryside probably isn't the best of ideas. So we prayed about it, we talked about it, we were advised from Warren as well as some of the local men in Zimbabwe that, hey, you should hold off there in South Africa for a while, make sure it's safe. So the net effect of that was we were forced, we had to wait 2 days, and we were forced to cut out the Bulawayo portion of the trip. And that was a big loss. God willing, we'll be able to go back and do that. So if your memory will recall, that's Tando is here in Bulawayo. So we had to cut this part out. But Tando graciously, we stayed the night right here at the village, and he drove 5 or 6 hours to come down and meet us here. So we at least had dinner with him for several hours one night and got to meet him, talk with him. And so he is very gracious about that. The congregations in Zimbabwe, it's a lot more mature of a work. We met 11 congregations, and there's at least 16, so we didn't see probably a third of them. But there's also 6 men that work as evangelists. And I would say full-time, but they also are farmers. They're self-sufficient. I think one of them is supported by another church. But it's funny, if you look at these names, you have Lucky, Champion, Wilbert, Albert, John Allos, and Douglas. So Champion, that's awesome. So I think Tim asked him, he's like, hey, where'd you get that name? And he said, from my mom. I was like, okay. So that's his name. So they kind of take a word they like, harmony, awesome, perfect. We'll give that to her. So anyways, it was really cool. And then also, look how beautiful this is. So there's something that is just pure about preaching under a tree. Think about during COVID when we were out in the parking lot and we felt like we were enduring, and you have the AC going on in your car. And I mean, These people walked miles to come to this. And then, they were waiting several times because we had to preach one place, preach at another, preach at another. If we got held up here, that's a cascading effect. So the people at this congregation were waiting here for like 5 hours for us. Like, that's enduring, and that, we talk about zeal. It's like, I can do better. Like, would I do that to come to church? I hope so. So driving conditions were also a little bit of a factor. This was crossing one little ditch that we were at. And so the road had been washed out and hand-packed again from the locals, where they had put some branches there and rocks. Now I decided to hold my phone out just for y'all, just to get that. So another one was this road right here. This is their main interstate between South Africa and Mutare, which is one of their huge cities. So this is the equivalent of like I-35. All I-35 jokes aside, like, we should thank God for what we have. So it's dirt, it's wet, it's muddy.
You've got a few.
There's two-way traffic.
You get back onto the original road, but it's just full of potholes.
And this is the good road. This is like the road you want to get on, right? So again, pretty fascinating. So some more about the congregations in Zimbabwe. This is one of the places that we were at as well. One thing I wanted to really point out. So here you can see they had like a homemade thatched roof. But this little girl right here, and I told her during the sermon that I was going to talk about her in the U.S. And I was like, you don't know it, little girl, but you just got all the kids back in my home congregation in trouble. Not only is she adorable, but she was sitting here, and I guess her job was to pass songbooks out. And so she would sit here, and her head is just on a swivel, right? And she's singing, because they're singing as people are coming up. And if there's an adult coming up, boom, she's up, she's grabbing a songbook, running to her, boom, giving it to her, come sit back down, and head on a swivel. And it was just the opposite of that when it was time to leave. And I told her, I don't know who your parents are, if they're here or not, but you're doing a fantastic job. It's like, what kind of wife will that little girl be someday? I can't tell the future, obviously, but how do you know the parents are doing good? How that little girl's acting. It can take a stranger can come in and see that. And so again, very humbling for me as a parent. This lady at this congregation, if you notice her, what is that? Right leg? No, left leg. It's missing. It's a prosthetic leg. It was bitten off when she was a girl by a crocodile. Her job in her village was, or her family, was to go down to the river and get water. And it was bitten off. And she's happy just to be alive. This is that same congregation. Show you what the scene's like. Beautiful. At another congregation here, you can see under the trees again. And this one, I wanted to point out again, this Christian lady right here. One, she's wearing a Georgia shirt, so you just got to what route did that take to get there, But despite that, she was the first member of this congregation, and it was kind of the route that I explained earlier, that she was the first one there. And the power of a strong, faithful Christian woman. And women a lot of times, you don't get acknowledged many times. It's the men, the men's job is this, men's job is this, but when the men aren't there, who has to lead then? If it's only women in a congregation, who does everything? What the women do. And so, who will you be? And again, super encouraging for me. Did I mess that up? Yes, I did. No. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. This is the congregation that benevolence was given to that I mentioned a week ago in the Sunday. message. Local food was given from another congregation there. This is another congregation where two congregations met. They traveled 5-6 kilometers apiece to meet us in a central location and met there. So I don't mean to cut it short. It's just we're a little, I'm long-winded. I apologize. This is in Mutare, Zimbabwe. This is Brother Stephen Rice. We don't support him monetarily, but we have helped him out with benevolence in the past. This is him singing. I think if Hugh's here, I don't know if Hugh's here, but you would love this guy. Notice the pews they have. It's handmade. They sat for 3 sermons on those limbs. And so if y'all are like turn around looking at it's 6 o'clock right now. They sat for 3 sermons and didn't complain once, okay? Just for context. I'm not saying anything, but just for context. I'm sorry. This is Sister Gloria, and she looks like she's about 14. She's 37. Okay, she's a member of Mount Maingi there in Mutare. That Brother Clayton, he preaches to that congregation. She has cervical cancer, and her husband. She has 4 children. Her husband, as soon as he found out she was sick, he left and went to Mozambique, abandoned the children and her, and that's unfortunately something that it's not unheard of there. Men will say, "Oh, situation's too bad, I'm gone," and left her there. When we came there, and she lives in a single room hut, is what we'd call it, with 1 couch. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was sitting on the ground. I thought that's just where they sat. She was sitting on the couch, saw us, drove up, and moved to the floor. She could barely stand up with the cancer that she has. And she, through respect for the fact that we were men, we were preachers, went and sat on the floor. That's embarrassing to me, obviously. Like, I hate that idea, right? But that's who they are, who she is. We are helping her out with her treatments as well, and we'll keep you updated with that. So this is Brother Warren's congregation back down in South Africa. This is on his farm that he and some of the other brethren there have built. It's called Mabalabala is the ranch. This it serves as a local congregation, not just for the members that are on his ranch, but also from miles around. People will go out and pick up each other so they can come to services. And there was probably, had about 30 people attending on a Wednesday night. This Wednesday, it was raining for whatever reason. It just doesn't rain a lot there. But they couldn't drive out and get some of the people, and so they had to walk there. So they literally had walked 6-7 kilometers to get there. All right, and I'll show you what they had to walk through in just a second. But this wasn't staged. This was just on their wall. So this just shows you what they're studying, and these are things that we would study here. This is aids, necessities, and additions. They're studying authority. And then over here, this is their not their order of assembly. This is their duty roster. And notice here, preaching, Sandy, Warren, and Innocent. Warren has trained guys to replace him so that he can go out and do other things and start other works. And that's so wise. This is their songbook that they have, and again, we have Shona, the Zimbabwe language, or one of them, and then English. And then this is what the women had to walk through. They told us they were scared to come to church that night. Can you guess why? Because at Cape Buffalo were in the forest that they walked through. These things will kill you, okay? So that's what they walked to get to church. So when we talk about zeal, a lot of times it's not a feeling, it's doing. So for what it is. So this is my last slide, and then Brother Tim will get up and give you his takeaways. Mine, culturally, it's a lot different. There are lingering effects from colonialism and tribalism that we won't fully understand. There's distrust of government that maybe we do understand. There's a lot of those things. The culture is very present-oriented, and that takes patience on us because we're not. We're on long-term planning, everything else. They're very right here, right now. And there are things that's good in and things that it's not so good in, and we have to be patient with them. They're highly superstitious culture. I paid for something using a credit card, and and the lady said, "Oh, you need to put your PIN in." And I said, "I don't think I'll need it." And it went through, and she looked at me like I was Gandalf from, and she's like, "How'd you do that?" And I said, "Magic." And she looked at me, and I was like, "I'm just kidding. It's a credit card. I don't know. So it's like, don't. But that's the thing. So, but people will use that against them. A huge movement there is the Zion Church of Christ, or not Church of Christ, the Zion Christian Church, and it combines African superstition with the Bible. And so it's like you can have your cake and eat it too. If you want to worship your ancestors, great. Here's Jesus, and all those things. So that's a big movement there, and that's something that the Christians there are tempted with sometimes, and that we have to be sure and help them preach against. So that's all my time. Thank you, Tim. Do you want me to sit up here?
Just a few spiritual takeaways, and then we'll wrap up. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take questions, but if you stay after the closing prayer, then and come down to the front, Ryan and I can address any questions hopefully you have. So just a few takeaways here. So first of all, the worship that we conducted in these village churches is essentially identical to what we did here this morning. So all 5 acts of worship were conducted. The main difference, though, is the fact that, except for one case, there was no church building. We were underneath the stars, underneath the tree, or underneath the shed. No classrooms, no pews, no air conditioning, no water fountains. The 3 men that are supported by West Main that were mentioned by Ryan, all of them appear to be doing the work of an evangelist. So if we look at 2 Timothy 4:5, Paul wrote to Timothy, "Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, rebuke, reprove, and exhort with complete patience and teaching." Then skip down to verse 5. "For as for you, always be sober-minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry." We believe that these 3 men are doing that. And then finally, we believe that Brother Schultz has a very deliberate and effective process of establishing local churches, building up the Christians within those local churches, and training local men to lead. So we mentioned there were 6 men that over the last 20 years, Warren has been able to train up in the various congregations, and they cycle around so they can be present for Sundays for multiple congregations. Warren comes in periodically, typically for 1 week a month, to check in on those men, to train those men, teach those men, and do whatever is necessary to help the brethren in those locations. Finally, the food benevolence provided by West Main and other churches appears to be used responsibly. We saw good evidence, as Ryan mentioned, of accountability and responsibility with the funds that have been provided by this treasury and by other treasuries for the benefit. There was mention along the way that it may have been mentioned that there were water wells that were drilled. Over the past 5 or 6 years, brethren from this congregation and some others privately funded, not through the treasury, privately funded the drilling of water wells, especially in southern Zimbabwe. Part of my responsibility was to check on how those water wells are doing. Since those were funded privately, we're not making that a part of this presentation, but most of you should have received an invitation to a Zoom meeting this coming Thursday evening, Lord willing, at 7 p.m., in which we'll have a full report on exactly what is the impact of those water wells to the needy brethren in southern Zimbabwe. If you don't have that invite, check your spam folder, and if you'd like to participate and dial in for that, it'll probably take about 45 minutes or an hour to get through it. Then please see me or Ryan, and we'll make sure you get that invite. The rest of the items we have are really need to be first discussed with the elders. There are some needs. There's some current needs for the brethren in both countries, and there's some future needs that we believe. But we feel like we'll hold this next slide until after Ryan can meet with the rest of the elders. That is the end of the presentation. We're running a little late here, and so we're going to ask that Trey Torno come forward and lead us in a closing prayer. And again, we'd love to answer your questions if you come down to the front afterwards.